Hey everybody, how are you? Hope everybody's having an amazing Saturday afternoon. This is what we like to call Saturday Afternoon Extremist. And I'm going to be catching up with you today about the news. And as always, folks, please do support me at patreon.com/Primo Radical. That would be much appreciated. I don't know if you folks saw my last stream, but I was kind of going over all of the various going over all the various things that's going on in my personal life right now, and it's a lot. My wife and I were looking to move, and we were looking to sell our house. And we went through the whole process. We found a house that we wanted to move to, and went through. We were starting to box everything up. Then we had the inspections done in our house. It turned out that the septic system was bad here, not the septic tank, because when we purchased the house, the septic tank was replaced, but the leach field was bad. So we're going through the process of fixing that now, which is very expensive. So I would appreciate any support that you folks might have for helping me fix that situation. And just generally, I know I've been on a bit of a hiatus again and looking to get back into it fairly soon. I also have my wife's family visiting, so things have been a little hectic. Also started a new full-time job, which is always fun. So lots of things happening this summer. Unfortunately, not able to get out and enjoy the fresh air. But of course, with the forest fires, that's really not an option either, at least this past week. Also, folks, in addition to becoming a patron, I also will be taking super chats at the end of the show. So if there's anything that you'd like to say to me, any questions you have, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, please do super chat during the show. And we're going to be talking about a few things today. Going to be talking about RFK Jr. and his pivot on Roger Waters, which was really unfortunate. But just wanted to cover some other news prior to that. So first off, of course, we have the indictment of Donald Trump, and that is the big news of the week. And this is, of course, the second indictment Donald Trump is now facing. He was indicted in New York on some filing different business records in regards to the Stormy Daniels case. That was a local case in New York. This is now a federal case where he's being tried under the Espionage Act for mishandling documents. And obviously it's a really big deal. He could theoretically go to prison, and that would not theoretically stop him from running for president. He could, in theory, we don't know how likely this is, but he could, in theory, go to prison and run for president from prison. We actually saw that happen with Eugene Debs 100 years ago. He ran for president from prison. But Trump could win. He could be sworn in prison. He could pardon himself from prison. So that seems like a very unlikely scenario, but it is something that could, in theory, happen. And it's just indicative of, one, how desperate the establishment seems to be to keep Trump out of office, keeping the 2016 fluke from ever happening again. It seems very desperate. The flurry of different indictments that's happening right now, from, again, what's happening in New York, what's happening with this documents case, and then also there's other criminal charges that could be filed against him too. One for inciting the Capitol riot, the insurrection on January 6th, 2021. And then there's also the case regarding a phone call to someone in Georgia regarding the 2020 election, which could also be criminal charges. So, again, it seems as though there's just a wave of criminal charges being thrown at Donald Trump right now in the lead up to the 2024 election. And if you look at Joe Biden, if you look and see how incompetent he is, he just fell down again recently, wandering around on stage, incoherent. It's pretty clear that he is a very weak presidential candidate going into the 2024 elections. And it's no secret that the bench for the Democratic Party is not that deep. Pete Buttigieg is not that light. Kamala Harris is not that light. They really don't have anybody waiting in the wings. And that's why, again, we're not even really seeing anyone else running in the primary other than outsiders like RFK or Marianne Williamson. But regardless of all that, it seems as though what they're trying to do is hurt Trump as much as possible, because he is, again, the front runner in the Republican field. And there's now, I believe, a dozen Republicans running. You have Mike Pence, Chris Christie, I believe, is in it or is going to be in it. You have a lot of just random businessmen who don't have much political experience, or Asa Hutchinson, who's not a very well-known politician, Nikki Haley. Really, the only substantial challenge that Trump has in the Republican side is Ron DeSantis. And he's really not even getting enough support to even if all of the other candidates endorsed DeSantis and all of their supporters went behind DeSantis, that still doesn't seem to be enough to help DeSantis win against Trump in a head-to-head election. But of course, it's still early, and these charges are still coming against Trump, so we'll see how that plays out. But I think that the most important point in all of this, and what's never discussed on the mainstream media, is the fact that all of our elected leaders are criminals. Obviously Donald Trump has broken laws. He's a billionaire and the former president of the United States, and of course he's broken tons of laws. Of course, if you objectively applied the law to him, he could go to prison for a long time. But if you objectively applied the law to Joe Biden and to these men, they would all go to prison. Any major politician, and probably 90% of the major business leaders in the United States, if you applied the law equally to them, they'd all be in jail, but they're not. And that, I think, again, speaks to how desperate they are. They actually are prosecuting Trump, because they would never prosecute any other major politician. It doesn't matter how overt their crimes are, because they are extremely overt. I mean, look at Joe Biden. He also had documents. Mike Pence also had documents. Why is Mike Pence, another Republican running in the Republican nomination, why is he not being tried? Why is the sitting president of the United States being tried? And again, look at the really horrific crimes that these men have committed. George W. Bush killed 1 million Iraqis. Barack Obama assassinated American citizens. And then, we have all the unconstitutional spying and all of that. There's really extreme crimes that these people are behind, but they're never charged with it because, again, they are the establishment. You'd think Donald Trump, as a billionaire who put a bunch of neoconservatives in his administration, would be establishment enough, but apparently not. And I suspect it's probably because he's really the only candidate saying that on his first day in office, he's going to be ending the war in Ukraine. Which we don't want that, right? How much money is Raytheon and Boeing making off of this war right now? So it's just absurd to me that you have this unequal application of the law, and we see that even ironically with Hillary Clinton, how she's responded to that. This is from The Hill. Hillary Clinton responds to Trump indictment with "but her emails" merch pitch. Hillary Clinton is reacting to former President Trump's federal indictments by making a pitch for her "but her emails" merchandise. The 2016 Democratic presidential nominee took to social media Friday, just hours after Trump announced Thursday that his legal team had been told he was indicted following an investigation into his handling of classified documents, with a plug for her tongue-in-cheek swag. Bringing this back in the light of recent news, Clinton told her more than 31 million Twitter followers. Get a limited edition "but her emails" hat and support Onward Together groups working to strengthen our democracy, she added. The $32 made in the U.S. caps emblazoned with the words "but her emails" are described as unstructured dad hats on Onward Together's sales page. Clinton faced scrutiny in 2016 over her use of a personal email server while Secretary of State, with the practice becoming a major political issue during her presidential campaign against Trump. And as you remember, this article continues on. The former First Lady's emails were subject to numerous investigations, including by the FBI, which declined to charge her with violating federal records-keeping requirements or other crimes. Because why would you, right? Why would you do that? That would be very unorthodox. Yet we have them prosecuting Trump in the same unorthodox way. Very weird. It's not the first time that the Clintons appeared to troll Trump by hawking the headwear. She made a similar sales pitch for the But Her Emails hats last year following a New York Times report that Trump had disposed of documents in the toilet of the White House as president. So again, I think it just goes to show you how there is a very unequal application of the laws. Because again, you could charge Hillary Clinton, you could charge Barack Obama, you could charge Joe Biden, but not just Democrats, you could charge Republicans. George W. Bush, Mike Pence, you could charge any major politician with breaking laws because they all do it. They all break laws. So why are they honing in on Donald Trump right now in 2023? Clearly it's because they don't want him getting back in office. And they're willing to do anything and appear as desperate as possible in the attempt to do that. And just be as transparently anti-democratic. And they don't even care if half the country thinks that the election is rigged. It doesn't matter to them because as long as they have some establishment mechanisms to control the population, who cares if people understand that we don't actually live in a democratic country. So that's that. But, I think this kind of speaks to a larger issue. And that's not just that the elections are rigged. It's that the media in this country and around the world is also suffering major pushbacks. And to a large degree, it also has to do with the war in Ukraine. So this was a major headline the past few weeks. British police detained journalist Kit Clarenberg, interrogate him about the gray zone. And as you folks may know, Kit has been on this show a few times. He's a great journalist. He does great work for the Gray Zone. Here's some articles here. Bombshell filing, 9/11 hijackers were CIA recruits. So he does the kind of journalism, investigative journalism, that the people in the mainstream media, the establishment sycophants in the mainstream media refuse to do. Kit Clarenberg actually does that. And he paid the price for that when he visited the UK last month. So this is from the Gray Zone. I'm going to read this here. British counter-terror police detained journalist Kit Clarenberg upon his arrival at London's Luton Airport and subjected him to an extended interrogation about his political views and reporting for the Gray Zone. As soon as journalist Kit Clarenberg landed in his home country of Britain on May 17, 2023, 6 anonymous plainclothes counter-terror police detained him. They quickly escorted him to a back room where they grilled him for over 5 hours about his reporting for this outlet. They also inquired about his personal opinion on everything from the current British political leadership to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Amazing how that came up. At one point, Clarenberg's interrogators demanded to know whether the Gray Zone had a special arrangement with Russia's Federal Security Bureau, FSB, to publish hacked materials. During Clarenberg's detention, police seized the journalist's electronic devices and SD cards, fingerprinted him, took DNA swabs, and photographed him intensively. They threatened to arrest him if he did not comply. Clarenberg's interrogation appears to be London's way of retaliating for the journalist's blockbuster reports exposing major British and U.S. intelligence intrigues. In the past year alone, Clarenberg revealed how a cabal of Tory national security hardliners violated the Official Secrets Act to exploit Brexit and install Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. In October 2022, he earned international headlines with the expose of British plans to bomb the Kerch Bridge, connecting Crimea to the Russian Federation. Kind of relevant in light of the dam that was just bombed also. Then came his report on the CIA's recruitment of 2 9/11 hijackers this April, a viral sensation that generated massive social media attention. Among Clarenberg's most consequential exposés was his June 2022 report unmasking British journalist Paul Mason as a UK security state collaborator hell-bent on destroying the Grey Zone and other media outlets, academics, and activists critical of NATO's role in Ukraine. Because Clarenberg's reporting on Mason relied heavily on leaked emails, Mason falsely accused him of assisting a Russian state-backed hack and leak disinformation campaign. Who haven't heard that about before? Who also was detained and arrested, and who has been tortured by British police at the behest of the United States government for allegedly being part of a hack and leak disinformation campaign. Emma Bryant, a self-styled disinformation expert who participated in Mason's campaign to sabotage NATO critics, dispatched lawyers to demand Clarenberg's removal. To demand Clarenberg remove all of his articles that mention her from the internet. The lawyer letters also threatened costly super injunctions to prevent further reporting and challenge the authenticity of the email's content. The cease and desist letters additionally leveled false and defamatory allegations against Clarenberg, including that he was personally involved in hacking her email and Twitter account. So here's Kit saying here, "This is absolutely outrageous censorship of my friends and colleagues, and particularly sinister given I and the Gray Zone News received formal cease and desist orders from Shoesmiths last week, acting on behalf of Emma Bryant." And there's a tweet from Max Blumenthal here. "YouTube has censored my and Aaron Matei's factual discussion of Paul Mason's secret collusion with the United Kingdom state to harass and bully and relentlessly deplatform us. It has done so on the basis of harassment and bullying. We assume pressure came from the same elements seeking to ruin us." Did the bogus and obviously malicious complaints by Paul Mason or Emma Bryant prompt the UK police to detain and investigate Clarenberg? Clarenberg's reports contain neither falsehoods nor anything approaching disinformation, which is precisely why intelligence-linked figures like Mason are so frustrated by their existence. Despite Mason and Bryant's allegations, there is not even hard evidence that Russian hackers were the source of the leaks. While reporting on leaked material, Clarenberg engaged in the same journalistic practice that the West's most prominent legacy newspapers, from the New York Times to the Washington Post, depend on to break news themselves. In fact, Thomas Rid, a self-styled disinformation expert and professor of strategic studies at Johns Hopkins University, has stated that journalists, quote, should not shy away from covering the leaks first reported by Clarenberg. It therefore appears that British authorities did not detain Clarenberg for any legal breaches, but because he reported factual stories that exposed the national security state's own violations of both domestic and international law, as well as malign plots of its media lackeys. So this seems to be this is the detainee copy. Notice of detention under Schedule 3 to the Counterterrorism and Border Security Act of 2019. Look at this here. Your duties. Whilst being examined, you must answer questions put to you by the examining officer. Give the examining officer any information in your possession which the officer requests, including pins and passcodes to any electronic devices in your possession. Give the examining officer on request either a valid passport, which includes a photograph, or another document which establishes your identity. Declare whether you have with your documents of a kind specified by the examining officer. Give the examining officer on request any documents which you have with you and is of a special kind specified by the officer. Cooperate with any search of your person or property, and or not willfully obstruct or seek to frustrate the taking of photographs or the taking of fingerprints or non-intimate biometric samples in the taking has been authorized by a superintendent or is authorized by virtue of a relevant previous conviction. Folks, this is a journalist. And this is what he was mandated to do by law. I know that the words Orwellian and dystopian and authoritarian get thrown around a lot, but how else would you describe this? That there is a journalist reporting the news, breaking stories about the security state that corporate media will not cover, that they flat out refuse to cover. Yet here's Kit Clarenberg, bravely, with everyone else in the gray zone, actually covering those stories, actually doing investigative journalism. God forbid. Can you imagine in this day and age in 2023 that there's actually people out there doing investigative journalism that are questioning the authorities, that are trying to find corruption, that are trying to find crimes committed by the US and UK governments, who are actually not just blindly repeating NATO propaganda, who are actually looking into things and saying, does this make sense? What do the facts say about this? What is the objective reality that we're living in? That's the crime. That's the crime. Not being indoctrinated is the crime. Actually wanting to understand reality is the crime. Not being propagandized, not being a stooge of the establishment, not just being another robot, not being an NPC. Actually thinking for yourself, that's the crime. Interrogated under counter-terror provisions, grilled about non-existent Russian ties. Journalist Kit Clarenberg arrived in the UK on May 17th from Belgrade, Serbia, where he lives. He was planning to visit friends and family, but first he would have to pass through an obstacle course British police laid before him. As soon as his flight landed at Luton Airport, the pilot announced that border police were just around the corner and asked all passengers to prepare their passports. The police were waiting for Clarenberg at the bottom of the stairs, leading passengers from the plane to the tarmac. They immediately led him to a back room and informed him of his detention under Schedule 3, Section 4 of the 2019 Counterterrorism and Border Act. 6 plainclothes officers surrounded Clarenberg and explained he faced arrest if he refused to answer their questions and hand over his personal electronics. They refused to tell him their names and offered call signs instead. Quote, "I'd been expecting something like this since a police interview request arrived last summer," Clarenberg told the Grey Zone, referring to a communique he received from a senior British detective on July 27, 2022. The email requested Clarenberg report to a station to be questioned about allegations by an unnamed complainant of offenses under the Computer Misuse Act. And here's the screenshot of that. Afternoon, Mr. Clarenberg. The purpose of this email is to request your attendance at a police station for a caution +3 interview. This is a PACE interview without arrest. There are allegations against you relating to offenses of harassment, malicious communication, and offenses under the Computer Misuse Act. My intention is to ask you questions relating to this allegation and document any response you choose to give to them. You are entitled to have a solicitor present, and I can arrange a solicitor for you, or you can arrange your own. At time that is suitable, we will need to discuss, and I am willing to work with you in order to choose an appropriate time. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Clarenberg was notified in September of 2022, see below, that the police investigation had been closed, however. Good morning, Mr. Clarenberg. In regards to the case against you, I have closed the case and no further action will be taken in this matter. I have been requested not to disclose the details of the complainant in this matter. However, I can disclose that there was insufficient evidence to proceed. The threshold for a circulation to be arrested are also not met, so should you attend the UK in the future, you will not be arrested. You will not be arrested? Is that like British English? Is that accurate? You will not be arrested for matters related to this allegation. Back in the interrogation room at Luton, Clarenberg was asked which passports he held in his possession. They seemed surprised that I only had a British passport with me, he recalled. The police then grilled him about whether he owned foreign property, which countries he had visited, and why. He was compelled to provide his address in Belgrade, disclose how much he paid for rent, and bizarrely, whether his energy costs were included. The officers then demanded to know why Clarenberg lived in Serbia. From there, police interrogators homed in on Clarenberg's work with the Gray Zone. Quote, "They asked which publications I wrote for, and I told them I write for many," he said. One even remarked they'd never previously heard of Mint Press Zone. I've never heard of Mint Press Zone either. I'd like to work for Mint Press Zone. They sound pretty cool. Their overwhelming, if not exclusive interest was in the Gray Zone. Well, clearly also Mint Press. The officers asked Clarenberg about articles including his report on the CIA's recruitment of would-be 9/11 hijackers, as well as his thoughts on 9/11 conspiracy theories. Then came a blizzard of questions relating to the Gray Zone. How much was Clarenberg paid by the publication? How often, and into which bank account? Who owned the site? How much contact did he have with Max Blumenthal, the author of this article and editor of The Gray Zone? Had he met Blumenthal in person? The counter-terror officers then rattled off a series of unfounded questions related to Russia. Does the Gray Zone have any agreement of any kind with Russia's Federal Security Bureau to publish hacked materials? Has Clarenberg knowingly been in contact with any FSB operatives? Is he in touch with current or former personnel of Russian state media? Who owns the Gray Zone, and is it sponsored by Russia? And then it has in parentheses here, as has been publicly stated many times, the Gray Zone is a fully independent outlet founded by me, Max Blumenthal. Unlike many of our adversaries, this outlet does not accept funding or support any state, including Russia. You know what's funny too is like you'd figure that the intelligence agencies would know that, right? Like they're spying on everyone all the time. They're spying, like if you're anywhere near a microphone or a camera of any sort, you are being recorded. And like obviously they track bank accounts and everything. You'd think that they would know that Max Blumenthal, who is the son of Sidney Blumenthal, that he, you know, they would be tracked. They would know if he is working for Russia. Like that would be just, you know, common knowledge in the intelligence community. So why are they harassing Kit Clarenberg about a connection between the Gray Zone and Russia that does not exist? Clearly. And they would know if it did exist. At this point, the officers took Clarenberg's bank cards out of the room for an extended period. They also seized his camera memory cards and SIMs, demanding he provide PIN codes to open them. Quote, "What was done with my bank cards, I do not know," he remarked. The same for the SDs. What they got off of these old and barely used cards was unclear. Next, Clarenberg's interrogators asked if he had any journalistic materials on hand, requesting that he warn them about the contents and where they were located so they did not hoover it up by accident. He wondered if the question was a public relations stunt devised in response to the media outcry this April over the British counterterrorism police detention of Ernest Mouret, a French publisher held and questioned about his views on Emmanuel Macron's widely despised pension reforms. There was also the chance they wanted him to lead them to sensitive content he had or was planning to cover. Clarenberg's police interrogators displayed intense interest in whether he belonged to any press organizations and if he held a press card or any professional qualifications. They then probed his career trajectory, asking how he entered the world of political journalism and about perceived employment gaps in Clarenberg's professional record. He was repeatedly grilled on his journey from covering financial issues a decade ago to political and national security reporting. Quote, "The police professed confusion at the transition, despite Clarenberg explaining that he studied politics in university. The officers repeatedly returned to this point. They clearly felt this didn't make any sense. Were they probing whether I had been recruited at some point or had been a sleeper agent all along?" Throughout the interview, the counterterrorism police probed Clarenberg aggressively on his political affiliations and beliefs. Was he involved in any activist causes in Belgrade? What did he think of the Russian government? Did he have an opinion on Russia's arrest of Evan Gersovich of the Wall Street Journal? What did he think of Rishi Sunak? One officer complained incessantly about Keir Starmer's being useless, prompting Clarenberg to wonder if the comments were a dangle aimed at drawing him out. I would imagine, probably. When Clarenberg noted that he had publicly criticized Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the police demanded to know if anyone from the Russian government had contacted him to complain. Quote, presumably, they wanted to know if my criticisms had pissed off my controllers. Which is a completely ridiculous proposition. Oh my God. You know, it's really sad and again frightening, and it's unfortunate that this is the reality that we live in, where journalists are being, where the handful of real journalists who actually exist are being interrogated by counter-terror police. But it's a completely laughable and ridiculous situation, isn't it? It's just it's like a scene out of a comedy. It reminds me of how 15 years ago, back when Bush was in office, you actually had liberals, criticizing the security state, and you had stuff like Harold and Kumar escaped Guantanamo Bay. It reminds me of something like that. It's just completely absurd and laughable. But now liberals are the neocons, so you would never see any kind of satire like this coming out of Hollywood. An extended philosophical discussion. He did this for 5 hours. 5 freaking hours he had to put up with this bullshit. These douchebag British counter-terror police questioning him for 5 hours. An extended philosophical discussion about journalism and the public interest followed. Your work might be interesting to the public, an officer told Clarenberg, but it's not in the public interest. Who decides what's in the public interest? He insisted that a journalist could be furthering the interests of a hostile state actor in reporting on national security issues. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. I tried to explain that if material can be authenticated, then the material is the source. We are not citing claims from a human source that provided the material. We are reporting on provided source material in a factual way. Hey man, that's what Julian Assange is in Belmarsh for. After 5 hours, the counter-terror police seemed to have run out of questions. You figure they would get bored after that long. I mean, they had by this point seized all Clarenberg's electronic devices, forced him to provide unlock codes for his phone and tablet, taken his SD cards, and combed through thousands of his personal photos. Pity whoever drew those short straws and had to stare at length at thousands of shots of brutalist architecture across the world I've taken over the years, he remarked. Authorities also fingerprinted Clarenberg, subjected him to DNA swabs, and repeatedly photographed him. As long as your prints have never been found on an IED in Afghanistan, we delete this data in 6 months, one cop said. One cop with a Northern Irish accent claimed. A week after releasing Clarenberg from detention, police returned his tablet with masking tape over the cameras, along with 2 memory cards. The police kept one old SD card, mostly containing music, on the grounds that it may be relevant in criminal proceedings. They're going to try him for burning CDs. Is that what they're doing? He remained under investigation by the British state at the time of publication. Good afternoon, Mr. Clarenberg. Following on from your Schedule 3 examination at London Airport on 17/5/2023, we originally seized one of your memory cards under Section 11.2a of CTBSA 2019. This has now changed to 11.2b of CT BSA 2019. What this effectively means is that one of your memory cards will be retained until our investigation is complete. You will be advised in due course on when your memory card can be returned to you. So, of course, folks, this is just absolutely insane and speaks more to the dystopian, Orwellian reality that we're living in now, where if anyone dares to go against the establishment in any sort of meaningful way, like, with all due respect to the Gray Zone, right? The Gray Zone does great work. They break tons of stories. They do, get attention. Obviously, they win awards for their journalism and stuff. But think of the stranglehold that the corporate media has on the average person out there, right? You walk into any office or any bar, like what? You walk into any office, right? They're all indoctrinated by CNN and MSNBC. You walk into any, bar or talk to a construction crew on the side of the road or something, like they'll be indoctrinated by Fox News. The corporate media has most people brainwashed, right? Yes, there is, a meaningful number of people who are out there who are not indoctrinated, but it's really a very small minority. And they use, big tech uses every trick in the book to suppress any kind of journalism, right? They shadow ban things, they demonetize, Google just doesn't show up things. I mean, for example, I've said this before, if you search for even the title of some of my videos on YouTube or things that I've covered extensively, like Jeffrey Katzenberg funding TYT or Howie Hawkins and the Green Party nomination 2020, just like things that like really only I have, things that I specifically have covered in depth and have created a lot of videos about, you can't really find those, right? And it's the case with, again, people like Mint Press News. If you try to search for their stories, they just don't come up on Google. Like, anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment reporting, independent journalism, or just, content creators, YouTubers, whatever, are suppressed by big tech. The Gray Zone is suppressed by big tech. So, yes, like, they are getting stories out there, but not to the majority of people. But even that is too much, right? The impact that they are having is too meaningful, and they can't even allow for that without harassing journalists. And the ironic thing is, again, Kit has done great work, but he's given a bunch of interviews the last few weeks about how he was detained by British police. So what is the effect of that? It's going to have people go out there and say, well, who is Kit Clarenberg? What kind of stories is he doing? What is the journalism that's making the authorities feel so threatened that they have to detain him and question him for 5 hours and steal his electronics and take DNA swabs? And, it's the same thing with Donald Trump also. Obviously, he was the president of the United States. Obviously, he has millions of supporters. But what is the impact? What is the net result of throwing all these charges at him in the lead up to an election? Is that having people generally have more trust in the system, or is it making them more suspicious of the system? So folks, again, we're going to get into the RFK story, but I did just want to cover a couple other instances of the Orwellian reality that we're living in, and this is another article by the Gray Zone. This is Aaron Mate, and this story is Leaks Reveal FBI Helps Ukraine Censor Twitter Users and Obtain Their Info. So again, if you didn't think it was just the UK who's harassing journalists for exposing crimes by NATO countries, nope, the FBI is doing it too, obviously. And they're even doing it on behalf of the Ukrainian government. So, let's read this again. This is by Aaron Mate. The FBI raided a Ukrainian intelligence effort. The FBI aided a Ukrainian intelligence effort to ban Twitter users and collect their data, new leaks show. Twitter declined to censor journalists targeted by Ukraine, including the Gray Zone's Aaron Mate. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has aided a Ukrainian intelligence effort to censor social media users and obtain their personal information, leaked emails reveal. In March 2022, an FBI special agent sent Twitter a list of accounts on behalf of the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, Ukraine's main intelligence agency. The accounts, the FBI wrote, quote, are suspected by the SBU in spreading fear and disinformation. They're spreading fear. In an attached memo, the SBU asked Twitter to remove the accounts and hand over their user data. The Ukrainian government's FBI-enabled targets extended to members of the media. The SBU list that the FBI provided to Twitter included my name and Twitter profile. So Aaron Mate is saying that they're on this list that the SBU gave the FBI, who gave to Twitter. Aaron Mate's name was on this list. In its response to the FBI, Twitter agreed to review the accounts for inauthenticity, but raised concerns about the inclusion of me and other American and Canadian journalists. The FBI's attempt to ban Twitter accounts at the request of Ukrainian intelligence is among the most overt requests for censorship revealed to date in the Twitter files, a cache of leaked communications from the social media giant. And again, this is something that Matt Taibbi and others were covering for since last year. These leaked documents showing how Twitter's previous Twitter under its previous leadership, how it was working very closely with the FBI, with the Department of Homeland Security, even with the Pentagon. And as we have discussed many times on this show, this really clearly points to a violation of the First Amendment. It was big tech being used, a private company being used as an instrument of the government to silence dissent. And particularly, we saw this with the Hunter Biden laptop story and how that was election interference. I think I can say that on YouTube now. Hopefully I can say that and not get taken down, have this deleted, because that was election interference. The FBI and with Joe Biden interfered in the 2020 election, meddled in the 2020 election by suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story, if nothing else. The FBI's censorship request was delayed in a March 27, 2020. Was relayed in a March 27, 2022 email from FBI Special Agent Alexander Kobzynets, the Assistant Legal Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, to two Twitter executives. 4 FBI colleagues were copied on the exchange. Thank you very much for your time to discuss the assistance to Ukraine, Kobzynets wrote. I am including a list of accounts I have received over a couple weeks from the Security Service of Ukraine. These accounts are suspected by the SBU in spreading fear and disinformation for your review and consideration. The attached documents drafted by Ukraine's SBU contained 163 accounts, including mine. The list is numbered to 175, but some accounts have 2 corresponding numerical lines. The listed Twitter profiles the SBU alleged have been used to disseminate disinformation and fake news to inaccurately reflect events in Ukraine, justify war crimes of the Russian authorities on the territory of Ukrainian state in violation of international law. Aaron Mate is an award-winning journalist who does more objective analysis of the news than pretty much anybody in the corporate media. Like, it's just insane, again, that if you do actual journalism, if you want to know what the truth actually is about what's happening in Ukraine, then you're somehow in league with the enemy. Wanting to know the truth makes you in league with the enemy. In order to stop Russian aggression on the information front, the SBU continued, we kindly ask you to take urgent measures to block these Twitter accounts and provide us with user data specified during registration. The SBU expressed its gratitude for the existing level of interaction. If granted, the users on the list would not only have been banned from Twitter, but had their phone number, date of birth, and email address disclosed to both the FBI and the SBU. So again, think about how important this is, right? You're just Joe Schmo. And I actually looked at the list. There's people on there with like 9 followers. So it's makes no sense how they were even targeting somebody. I don't know if it was just liking a certain tweet or certain hashtag or what. But there are people on this list who have essentially no followers, right? So you're Joe Schmo, you make a Twitter account, I don't know, you like a couple things, and you just say like something like, oh, I wonder if NATO expansion contributed to the conflict in Ukraine. Something like that. So now Ukraine somehow sees, the SBU somehow sees this tweet. They say, hey, FBI, we want to know everything about this person. The FBI goes along with it, goes to Twitter, and says, hey, give us this person's information so that we, the FBI, an American intelligence network, can go tell Ukraine. So potentially, if you're an American citizen, if you're an American, the FBI is going to give your information to Ukrainian intelligence. Not at all treasonous, not at all illegal. And then he has actually the list here. In response, Yoel Roth, Twitter's then head of trust and safety, informed Special Agent Kobzinets and his FBI colleagues that Twitter would review the report accounts under our rules. But he warned that the list included a few accounts of American and Canadian journalists, e.g. Aaron Mate. Therefore, Roth said, Twitter's review would focus first and foremost on identifying any potential inauthenticity. Roth then suggested that he would be open to suspending authentic accounts if it could be proven that they have a hidden tie to a foreign government. Journalists who cover the conflict with a pro-Russian stance are unlikely to be found in violation of our rules, absent other context that might establish some kind of covert/deceptive association between them and a government, Roth wrote. Any additional information or context in those areas is, of course, welcome and appreciated. You know, in previous Twitter Files releases, Yoel Roth really, looked like a jackass. But, the more and more that we see of this, you have to, appreciate the fact that the guy was being constantly inundated with requests by the FBI and DHS and others for things like this. I'm not defending Yoel Roth here. Obviously, the guy's a douchebag. But, you just have to appreciate that fact for a minute, that, he goes to work day in, day out, and is just getting these kind of requests by the FBI. Hey, can you give us all these people's information so we can pass it along to Ukrainian intelligence? It's just absolutely nuts. Absolutely, completely insane that they would even ask. How does it go through someone's head that's okay, this is perfectly fine. It's fine for me to ask Twitter to give us information for us to relay to Ukrainian intelligence, information that might be specific to Americans. Get us as an American intelligence agency, with our mission nominally being to protect Americans, to pass along information on Americans to foreign intelligence. How does anyone even think for a second, oh, that's perfectly fine? There's nothing wrong with that. So, good on Yoel Roth for not going along with that. However, I think with anyone with any integrity, any brain cell would think, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. In his reply, Kobzinets did not directly acknowledge Roth's concerns about Ukraine's FBI-abetted effort to censor journalists. Understood, Kobzinets told Roth. Whatever your review determines an action Twitter deems is appropriate. He also indicated that the FBI would not meet Roth's request for any context that might establish ties between journalists and a foreign government. Unlikely there will be any additional information or context. Because there isn't any. Which is exactly the same reason that they're questioning Kit Clarenberg about this, hoping that he says there is when there isn't. And again, if there was, they would know about it. It would be common knowledge in the intelligence community if the gray zone was funded by Russia. If the gray zone was funded by Russia, it would be completely off of social media right now. They would do what they did to RT and Sputnik and all of them. They would just wipe it off of the internet. They would get rid of it. But it's not funded by Russia. And again, if it was, they would know. Inside Twitter, Roth forwarded the FBI request to two colleagues. Quote, "This is the output of our meetings with the FBI last week," he wrote. "The list of accounts is a mixed bag. There's some state media mixed in with a bunch of other stuff, but given the context, I think a deep dive here is warranted." In an email, I asked Special Agent Kobzinets if he had vetted Ukraine's censorship request list before sending it to Twitter. I also asked Kobzinets if, after being informed by Twitter's Roth that the FBI was trying to censor journalists on the SBU's behalf, whether that had prompted any review or revision of his assistance to Ukrainian intelligence. Kobzinets did not respond. The FBI's National Press Office also declined to answer questions. Among several queries, I invoked Twitter's warning that the FBI's assistance to Ukraine entailed censoring journalists and asked if that has prompted any change in the Bureau's collaboration with Ukrainian intelligence. Quote, "While we appreciate your inquiry, as a matter of practice, we do not confirm, deny, or otherwise comment on specific interactions, nor confirm the veracity of correspondence," an FBI spokesperson wrote. The FBI officials copied on the Kobzinets exchange with Twitter included Elvis Chan, good old Elvis Chan, an assistant special agent in charge, ASAC, of the FBI's San Francisco field office where he manages its cyber branch. Chan was active in the FBI's contacts with Twitter when the social media giant's censorship of reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop shortly before the November 2020 election. As I recently reported, he was also involved in FBI's decision to forego a direct inspection of the DNC servers and instead rely on the Hillary Clinton-funded cyber firm CrowdStrike in the Bureau's probe of alleged Russian hacking. So we've gone full circle here, folks. Again, another example of how if you're on the establishment side, your crimes just don't matter. And the FBI will actually help you perpetrate those crimes. Durham ignores Clinton role and new holes in Russian hacking allegations. So if you read this article, this will go over that story. Of the 163 accounts named by the SBU, 34 were suspended and 20 no longer exist. The rest remain active. Those marked for censorship by Ukraine but remain online include Russian politicians, Gennady Zyuganov, a longtime member of Russia's Communist Party and parliamentarian who lost to Boris Yeltsin in Russia's 1996 election, which we interfered in to make sure that Yeltsin got reelected, by the way, when we meddled in Russia's election, which also, by the way, paved the way for Vladimir Putin. So if you are one of these people who hate Vladimir Putin and thinks he's the Antichrist, well, guess what? The U.S. pretty much ensured that he would become president by interfering in 1996 and making sure that the Communist Party did not get back in power. So there you go. More blowback of U.S. foreign policy. Also, Dmitry Rogozin, Russia's former deputy prime minister, and Sergei Mironov, a Russian politician and parliamentarian. The list also included Russian journalist Vladimir Solovyov, a television news host, and Margarita Simonian, editor-in-chief of the Russian state-controlled network RT. Several Russian government agencies and media outlets were also listed. The Ukrainian nationals targeted by the SBU's suppression request include Anatoly Sharir, a video blogger and politician who fled Ukraine in 2012 and subsequently received European Union asylum. Andriy Portnov, a Ukrainian lawyer and politician who served as a senior official under Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych until the latter's ouster in the February 2014 Maidan coup. Both Sharir and Portnov's Twitter accounts remain active. The disclosure of a collaboration on censorship between the FBI and the SBU is the latest documented instance of Ukrainian state-tied attempts to target foreign voices. A Ukrainian website known as I'm sorry, guys. I'm not good with the Ukrainian. Mirotvorets maintains a list of what it calls enemies of Ukraine. I was recently added to that list, along with the Gray Zone's Anya Parampil, as well as the comedian and YouTube host Jimmy Dore. The Mirotvorets database was co-founded by Anton Gerashenko, former deputy prime minister at Ukraine's Ministry of Internal Affairs, where he now serves as an advisor. Last year, the Global Tech Media Conference Web Summit withdrew a speaking invitation to the Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal and I after Olena Zelenska, the wife of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, demanded our cancellation. Another Gray Zone colleague, Kit Clarenberg, was recently detained and interrogated about his journalism by British authorities. News of the FBI's work with Ukrainian intelligence to censor Twitter users also follows reporting from journalist Li Feng that the FBI has pressured Facebook to remove accounts and posts deemed by the SBU to be Russian disinformation. According to Feng, a senior Ukrainian official in regular contact with the FBI defined disinformation in such broad terms that it could mean viewpoints that simply contradict the Ukrainian government's narrative. Which could be anything. Again, if you report something that's objectively true that is against Ukrainian propaganda, for instance, does anybody remember last November when Ukraine bombed Poland and vigorously denied they had done it? And that when the bombing initially happened, the first 24 hours, there was a media blitz. This is Russia. Russia has attacked Poland. Article 5, World War III. But luckily, there were some sane people out there who said, no, this wasn't Russia. This clearly wasn't Russia. This was Ukraine. Ukraine bombed Poland and killed 2 farmers. I don't know if Ukraine ever acknowledged that they did it, even though the entire rest of the world does, or if they ever apologized for killing those Polish farmers. But, I mean, if you say that, I mean, is that considered by the Ukrainian government to be disinformation? If you acknowledge objective reality? Seems likely. So again, folks, I'm going to be getting into the RFK story soon. I know that is the that's the thumbnail and title I gave this video. So I'm definitely going to get into that soon. Again, folks, if you want to submit any super chats, I'll be happy to read those at the end of the show. Just going to take another swig of my PBR here, Pabst Blue Ribbon. This is the working class beer, if you didn't know. Working class American beer, PBR. I wholeheartedly endorse it. So, folks, let's talk about some more censorship. Double Down News. Our interview video with Roger Waters, which reached over 1.5 million people, has been deleted. This is extremely disturbing, Twitter. Elon Musk, can you please help explain and reinstate the video with Roger Waters? So there's your free speech champion, folks. Elon Musk. I thought Twitter was supposed to be the free speech platform. What happened there? How is it that Double Down News does this interview with Roger Waters that gets 1.5 million views as Roger Waters is being targeted in the most transparent smear campaign ever, trying to get him labeled as an anti-Semite because 45 years ago he wrote The Wall, which is probably the most well-known rock opera that exists, which is very clearly an anti-fascist, anti-Nazi work Similar to how Charlie Chaplin and the Three Stooges and Mel Brooks and Monty Python and so many others have satirically mocked Nazis and fascists. That's what Roger Waters and Pink Floyd did with The Wall. And now today in 2023, because of Roger Waters' activism on behalf of Palestinians, because of his perspective on the war in Ukraine, again, we keep coming back to the war in Ukraine, and because of his speaking out for Julian Assange, he's been targeted and labeled an anti-Semite for making something that is clearly anti-fascist and anti-Nazi. Because he's anti-Nazi, he's an anti-Semite. Does that make any sense? But that's the world we're living in. That's the double think, right? So Double Down News puts out an interview with Roger Waters where they can go over how ludicrous this all is and point it out and speak to people so that they can actually think about this logically. All right, does making a piece of art that mocks Nazis, does that make somebody a Nazi or does that make them not a Nazi? And they put this up, and what happens? It gets too many views and it gets taken down from Twitter. So, again, there's your free speech platform for you folks. There's Elon Musk. And this just goes to a larger point where people think that, Elon Musk and all these other folks are these anti-establishment figures when they're really not, when they're just in on the psyop, right? You're supposed to think that you actually have a platform for free speech, but you don't. And if you actually start gaining traction with real free speech, it just gets taken down still. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, if it's Twitter or YouTube or Facebook. It's just being marketed differently. They changed the marketing from being, one of the liberal social media networks to, we have this right-leaning or classical liberal or whatever, libertarian social media network. Nope, sorry, not really. Not really. He's still being, he's still part of the oligarchy, for one. But he's also subject to being influenced by the same organizations that influenced Twitter's previous ownership. So, I guess you can say it's better than it was before, but it's still not really a free speech platform, is it? Or else this interview would not have gotten taken down. But again, let's talk about the Roger Waters story overall. So again, he's been target of a smear campaign, and one of the people that spoke out in favor of him was RFK Jr. And RFK Jr. put out these tweets saying how Roger Waters was speaking truth to power and whatnot, and those got taken down. I don't have it pulled up, but let me see if I can actually pull it up here. My media. It's going to be a lot to go through. Plus, it was a few weeks ago. Oh, this was another story too. If I had more time, I'd cover. Do you guys see this when Max Blumenthal confronted? Here we go. Confronted Rachel Maddow. That's great. If you haven't seen that, please look that up. So here's the tweet that RFK Jr. put out initially, and this was in the midst of Roger Waters being targeted. Clearly, right? Like, why is Roger Waters in the news? It's because he's being targeted by the smear campaign. That's the entire reason that Roger Waters is in the news right now. So in the midst of this controversy, RFK Jr. puts out this tweet. Roger, you are the global hero Orwell had in mind when he said, quote, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Let's chew on this quote for a second, right? In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I could not agree more, right? And that's just the theme of our show today of why Kit Clarenberg is being targeted, why Aaron Mate is being targeted. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So RFK goes on in this deleted tweet. The high priests of the totalitarian orthodoxies are trying to silence you with censorship, gaslighting, and defamation. Please keep speaking truth to power. That's a powerful tweet, isn't it? That really gets to the heart of the matter. And it's all about speaking up and being brave. And what did RFK do? He deleted that tweet. He deleted a tweet saying, we need to speak truth to power. We need to be bold. We need to go against the high priests of the totalitarian orthodoxy. He puts that out there and he deletes it. Now, again, if you've watched my content for a while, you know a lot of people don't actually run their Twitter accounts, right? Mike Gravel, famously. We went through this. Mike Gravel was a guest on my show over and over again because he didn't run his Twitter account, and the people running his campaign just keep putting out bullshit that had nothing to do with Mike Gravel's beliefs, and were trying to misrepresent what he said in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, right? Trying to hide his endorsement, his co-endorsement of Tulsi and Bernie. So every time a new egregious tweet would come out, I'd have Mike Gravel back on the show and say, hey, Mike, do you believe this? And he'd say, no. I'd say, okay, thanks for letting us know. Because the kids who are running your Twitter account with your name on it are saying that you believe that. So he didn't run his Twitter account. Jesse Ventura, during the 2020 election, did not run his Twitter account either. That's why the tweets that he was putting out were completely incongruent with what he would say in person. So I honestly don't know if RFK wrote this, if he deleted it. It could have been one person in his campaign wrote it, somebody else deleted it. I don't know. Kucinich might have written this for all I know, and somebody else decided to delete it. Or, just some low-level staff or whoever they paid to manage the Twitter account. But regardless, this says RFK Jr.'s name on it. He, his campaign at least was saying, keep going, Roger, you're speaking truth to power. It gets deleted. So then there are two other tweets subsequent to that where he's explaining why he deleted that. So RFK Jr. says here, in my remarks about Roger Waters, I was referring to his dissent on COVID. Oh, really? And the war in Ukraine. So, on May 27th, 2023, in the midst of this big Roger Waters controversy having to do with whether or not the wall is anti-Semitic, you just unrelatedly tweet this out in regards to COVID and the war in Ukraine. Okay. I have only recently learned about some of his other views, which I do not share. I support Israel's right to exist within secure borders, and I also support the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. So he deletes this, he puts out these clarifying tweets, then he deletes them too. Or again, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was RFK Jr., maybe it was somebody in his campaign. His campaign puts out the tweet of support, they delete it. They put out these other clarifying tweets and delete them. And again, it's so ironic because the whole point of the original tweet is about speaking truth to power. About being honest, about acting bravely. It's just, oh shit, delete. So there's all that. So, some folks might be wondering, hey, what's going on here? So as this was happening, there is a famous celebrity rabbi, Shmuley Boteach, I believe it's pronounced. It's spelled like Boteach, but I think it's pronounced Boteach. Or Boteach. In any case, so he was putting out these attacks on Roger Waters and on RFK. So when the initial supportive tweet came out, this put RFK, this got the attention of Boteach, where he is now going after RFK. And here's one of the posts. Holocaust hit squad's new recruit. KKK leader David Duke joins RFK Jr. defends Roger Waters. So, not only is he clearly suggesting that Roger Waters is a Nazi here, he's putting him in league with David Duke of the KKK, and he says here, look, KKK leader David Duke, conspiracy theorist Robert Kennedy Jr. So he's putting all these people together, saying they're all anti-Semites. Roger Waters is an anti-Semite. KKK leader David Duke is an anti-Semite. Conspiracy theorist Robert Kennedy Jr. Conspiracy theorist. Right? They're all the Holocaust hit squad. So what happens after that? You go from that. Oh. Here's another post by Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. So grateful that my friend and great friend of Israel, Robert Kennedy Jr., marched with me today with an Israeli flag at the Celebrate Israel 75 parade in Fifth Avenue in New York City. He goes in a matter of 5 days, from saying Robert Kennedy is a conspiracy theorist who's in league with KKK leader David Duke and anti-Semite Roger Waters, calling him part of the Holocaust hit squad. Like, really, like the most demonizing that you can go after somebody, right? 5 days later, 5 days, my friend. And there they are marching together. It's absolutely insane, isn't it? It's just crazy. So here's a video of the two together. Let's watch this. They couldn't cut that? Hold on. I just gotta say. I'm sorry. They couldn't cut that? No. Start out. They couldn't cut that part?
Our dear friend Bobby Kennedy, phenomenal friend of Israel and the Jewish community, for joining us to celebrate Israel parade on Israel's 75th birthday. Bobby, this crowd loves you. God bless Israel. I am the champion for Israel as president. God bless you. And you see how much they have, the love they've shown you, your family's legacy, your family's contributions to America, and the friendship between Israel and the United States. And God bless you, Bobby. Thank you very much.
God bless you. So, here's another photo from the event. Celebrate Israel. There's RFK Jr. Clearly doing damage control. Like, can we just call it that? It's clearly RFK Jr. doing damage control with Shmuley Boteach. Here's another photo of the two together. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach today met with Democratic presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. and discussed Israel, the rise of anti-Semitism, and Kennedy's recent tweet where he supported Roger Waters. Quote, "It was courageous of Bobby to come and meet with me and reassert his lifelong support of Israel and the Jewish people, continuing in the legacy of his great father, who was murdered by a Palestinian gunman, Saran, because of his own support of Israel in 1968. Rabbi Shmuley and Kennedy discussed the volatile situation in the Middle East and the challenges facing America for more than 2 hours. Kennedy explained that his tweet about Waters was in response to someone sharing with him a picture of Waters flashed of Kennedy at one of his concerts, saluting the candidate's willingness to swim against societal currents. Quote, "Bobby told me he had no idea that Waters was a vicious anti-Semite And when he studied the issue and facts, he immediately deleted the tweet. I believe Bobby and I thank him for his repudiation of Waters. How tragic it is for Waters to have his legacy as an anti-Semite now overtake his legacy as an accomplished artist. Kennedy said his dedication to Israel's security is unshakable and unalterable. He also said he had reserves, that he reserves the right to challenge some of its policies, for example, as an environmentalist with regard to water rights. Rabbi Shmuley agreed that the beauty of Israel, as opposed to all of its neighbors, wow, man, is that of an open democracy with a free press, and just like America, welcomes criticism. Kennedy and Boteach discussed the Holocaust and the existential and genocidal threats facing the Jewish nation, and Kennedy once again affirmed his profound commitment to Israel's security. Quote, I told Bobby that his father was one of Israel's greatest friends, and we in the Jewish community mourn him till this day. I then asked him to please march with me this Sunday, June 4th, at the annual Celebrate Israel parade. And he immediately agreed. The conversation was riveting. While we disagreed on many issues, he speaks with a refreshing and nonpartisan candor. I look forward to jointly marching this Sunday to champion the Middle East's only democracy and the world's only Jewish state. So there was that. So, who is Shmuley Boteach? Well, guess what, folks? He's pretty famous. There he is with Donald Trump. There he is with Ron DeSantis. There he is with Chris Christie. There he is with Cory Booker. And there he is with Pam Anderson. There he is with Roseanne Barr. There he is with Michael Jackson. He actually became very famous for his friendship with Michael Jackson. Hey, there he is with Cory Booker and Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard going out to dinner. Here's with a sign. Putin war crimes. Here's Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo again. Larry Elder. He's another Republican running for president. Benjamin Netanyahu. The two of them are with Dr. Oz. Hey, with Steve Bannon. And some more with Tulsi. So, it's kind of funny that he has so many ties to so many people across establishment politics, anti-establishment politics, so many different celebrities. And it seems pretty clear to me, that RFK Jr., he was getting targeted by Shmuley, being called an anti-Semite, being called, likened to David Duke. So he deletes all the tweets and then does damage control, reaches out to the guy, meets with him, and then marches in a parade in support of Israel. So, again, folks, this is really disappointing. RFK Jr., I think he's much, much better than Biden, obviously. I've been critical of Marianne Williamson. I think she's better than Biden. So, as far as the Democratic nomination goes, sure, it would be great if RFK Jr. wins. I don't think that's really disputable. Obviously, especially on the subject of Ukraine, he's much more sane. And, I'd still say the same thing of Tulsi Gabbard. If she had won, the Democratic nomination in 2020, that would have been great. But we have to really think, long term, and who is really part of the PSYOP and who's not part of the PSYOP, and who's a craven politician and who's not. And the fact that they got him to delete this tweet and go against the entire spirit of this tweet by betraying Roger Waters and, trying to make as clear as possible that he's a supporter of Israel I mean, is RFK Jr. is also going to march in a Palestinian parade? Is he going to march for Palestinian rights? So again, it's very disappointing. I think that RFK Jr. Is probably the preferred candidate in the Democratic race for the nomination. But again, this was a supreme disappointment. This is just a major character flaw that's showing through here in all of this. So, tell me what you think, folks. Sorry, I'm going to crack open another PBR here. Tell me what you think. Again, if you have any super chats, I'll read those. If you have any opinions about RFK, about him deleting this tweet, about him marching in this parade, about Shmuley Boteach and the fact that he's connected to so many different politicians and so many different celebrities. I think that, again, just even when we think we're outside the confines of the uniparty, even when we think we're thinking outside the box, when we're backing these anti-establishment folks, are they really anti-establishment, or are we still kind of falling for the same professional wrestling storylines? Are we still just buying into the show and not really seeing through it and not understanding what's actually happening? I think that's an important question to ask. So, again, I would say if you're registered as a Democrat, I don't know how many of you viewers out there are registered as Democrats, but if you are registered as a Democrat, probably voting for, or if it's an open primary in your state, probably voting for RFK Jr. for the Democratic nomination makes sense. But, I'd be looking somewhere else in the general. I'd be looking at Cornel West or somebody else, because this is it's a big character flaw to just become be such a coward and just back away from this tweet like you did and just feel pressured by the same smear campaign that Roger Waters is going through right now. The second that you become a target in the same way, the second that you start being labeled as an anti-Semite in the same way, you're going to run away from that, disown Roger Waters, and go out there and march in a parade and hang out with the celebrity rabbi just to try to prove that you're not an anti-Semite. That's just real cowardice. And you'd think that somebody who had the bravery to speak out against the COVID tyranny, who has the bravery to speak out against the war in Ukraine, you'd think he'd have the bravery too to stand up against that smear campaign, but apparently not. Apparently that's a bridge too far. And again, we just see a real character flaw with RFK here. So very sad, I think. So last thing I want to close on, folks, just want to point out here, we're getting images of this counteroffensive that Ukraine is launching now, and of these Leopard tanks and these other vehicles just being destroyed by Russia. And it seems to be so far a very failed counteroffensive. And again, it's sad because this is your taxpayer money, whether you're an American citizen or Canadian or a European member of NATO. This is your tax money that could be building your community, that could be going towards fighting off the austerity that's being pushed on us now. No, it's going to Raytheon, to Boeing, to weapons manufacturers, to the military-industrial complex, to make these vehicles to go to Ukraine to get blown up by Russia. Does that make any sense at all? Is that making your life better? I don't think this is making my life any better. Is it even accomplishing anything for the war efforts for Ukraine to reclaim the Donbass? No. It's just lining the pockets of the weapons manufacturers so they can wheel these things out with no air support so they can get blown up by Russia. So by any standard, by any metric, from any viewpoint, it's nonsense. It's idiocy. The only viewpoint where this makes any sense is that you are building these tanks and you're making a profit for everyone that gets blown up and gets reordered. That's the only way this makes any sense. So, Good times. So again, folks, I appreciate you watching today. Looks like there are no super chats, but again, I really do appreciate your support. If you don't mind signing up at patreon.com/Primo Radical. As I mentioned, I'm dealing with septic issues here. It's very expensive. So any support that you could show, I'd be very supportive of that. And yeah, I'm not sure when I'll be back again. As I mentioned, I have a lot of things going on now, unfortunately, in my personal life, where it's just difficult to get on here and stream for a couple hours. But again, I really do appreciate your support, and thank you for watching. And again, please follow me on Twitter, like Primo Radical on Facebook as well. And I'll be back at some point in the near future with a brand new interview. Actually, folks, I'm actually going to be going to see Jimmy Dore tomorrow at it's called the Hartford Funny Bone. It's actually in Manchester, Connecticut. So if you're in the Connecticut area, if you're going to be seeing Jimmy Dore, I will see you there. But thanks again, folks, for watching. I appreciate it. And until next time, stay radical.